Welcome back. Tonight we descend into the earth itself, following the ancient myth of Demeter and Persephone, a story of love and loss, of grief so profound it changed the world, and of the seasons that still echo a mother's sorrow. Find a comfortable position, let your breathing slow, and allow yourself to drift into the oldest of stories, where gods walked among golden wheat and the land itself could weep. Long before our time, when the world was young and gods moved freely between earth and sky, there lived a goddess whose very presence meant abundance. Her name was Demeter, and she was the keeper of all growing things. Where she walked, grain ripened. Where she rested, fruit hung heavy on the branch. The earth loved her, and she loved the earth in return, tending it with careful hands and an open heart. But Demeter's greatest love was not for wheat or vine. It was for her daughter, Persephone, a young goddess whose beauty was spoken of even in the halls of distant Olympus. Persephone had her mother's gentle spirit, but where Demeter was golden and warm like summer sun, Persephone was fresh as spring rain, bright and curious, forever wandering through meadows thick with wildflowers, singing to herself in a voice that made even the stones feel joy. Mother and daughter lived simply, far from the complications of the celestial court. They kept to the fields and forests, to the mortal villages where they were welcomed and loved. Demeter taught her daughter the secret names of seeds, the songs that made roots grow deep, the prayers that called forth blossoms. Persephone learned eagerly, but she also loved to wander, to explore the wild edges of the world, to discover what grew in shadow as much as in light. It was on one such wandering that everything changed. Persephone had gone farther than usual that day, following a path of white flowers that seemed to lead her forward like beckoning hands. The sun was warm. The air smelled of honey and cut grass. She bent to gather blooms, weaving them absently into chains, her mind peaceful and empty of worry. She did not notice how quiet the birds had grown. She did not see the earth beginning to tremble beneath her feet. The ground opened. Not slowly, not with warning, but all at once, a great splitting of stone and soil, and up from that darkness came a chariot drawn by horses black as midnight, their eyes burning like coals. And driving them was Hades, lord of the underworld, the god of all that lies beneath, ruler of shadows and the countless dead. He had seen Persephone from his dark throne, had watched her through cracks in the earth, and had grown obsessed with her light, her laughter, the way she moved through the world of the living with such unguarded joy. He wanted that light for himself. He wanted it brought down into his sunless kingdom, to shine for him alone. Before Persephone could cry out, before she could even understand what was happening, Hades reached down and pulled her into the chariot. The horses screamed and plunged back into the earth, and the ground sealed itself behind them, smooth as if it had never been broken, leaving only scattered flowers and a single abandoned sandal in the grass. The echo of Persephone's scream traveled far, but not far enough. By the time it reached Demeter, working in a distant field, her daughter was already deep beneath the world, descending into caverns where sunlight had never reached, where the air itself tasted of stone and silence. Demeter heard that scream in her bones before she heard it with her ears. She dropped the sheaf of wheat she had been holding and ran faster than any goddess had ever run, calling her daughter's name until her voice went raw. She searched the meadow. She found the flowers, the sandal, the disturbed earth. But of Persephone there was no sign. What followed was a grief beyond measure. Demeter abandoned her sacred duties. She cast aside her divine robes and wandered the earth disguised as an old woman, searching, always searching, asking every shepherd and farmer, every river and tree if they had seen her daughter. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The goddess of the harvest forgot to tend the fields. The crops withered. The orchards bore no fruit. Animals grew thin. The earth, sensing its keeper's anguish, began to die. At night Demeter would sit at crossroads and weep, her tears falling onto barren ground. She would not eat, she would not rest. Her hair grew tangled with dust and leaves. Her eyes, once warm as summer wheat, became hard and distant. The other gods sent messengers, pleading with her to return to her duties, warning her that mortals were beginning to starve. But Demeter would not listen. Let the world end, she thought. Let everything turn to dust and silence. What did any of it matter if Persephone was gone? She did not know that her daughter was not dead, only taken. Far below, in the vast palace of the underworld, Persephone sat in chambers more beautiful than any on earth, surrounded by jewels that had grown in darkness for 1,000 years, by gardens of silver flowers and fountains that ran with liquid starlight. Hades had given her everything his realm could offer, everything except freedom, everything except the sun. He was not cruel to her, not in the way mortals understood cruelty. He did not raise his voice, he did not strike or threaten, but he would not let her leave. The underworld, he explained gently, could not simply be walked out of. The living did not belong there, and once you had crossed its threshold, its laws bound you. He told her she would learn to love the darkness as he did. He told her time would ease her longing for the sky. But Persephone only grew quieter, paler, more still. She would not eat the food brought to her on golden plates. She would not drink the wine poured into cups of carved obsidian. She sat in her beautiful prison and thought of her mother, of sunlit fields, of birdsong and the smell of rain on warm earth. She did not weep, because she sensed somehow that tears belonged to the living, and she was afraid that if she wept, she would forget she had ever been alive at all. Above, the world continued its slow death. The mortals built altars and made sacrifices, begging the gods for relief. The earth was locked in a barren cold unlike anything known before. Nothing would grow. Snow fell in places that had never seen winter. Children cried with hunger. The old and weak began to die. Finally, Zeus himself, king of all gods, looked down from Olympus and saw the suffering. He understood then what his brother Hades had done, and he understood too that Demeter would not relent until her daughter was returned. The order of the world depended on the goddess of the harvest. Without her willing participation, everything would collapse. Mortals would perish, and with no mortals, there would be no one to honor the gods with prayer and sacrifice. Even Zeus, in all his power, could see that this could not continue. He sent Hermes, the messenger god, down into the shadowed depths, carrying a command that even Hades could not refuse. Hermes descended through caverns and tunnels, through rivers of forgetting and fields where the shades of the dead wandered aimlessly. He came at last to the great palace, where Hades sat upon his throne of black stone, and Persephone sat beside him, silent and still as a statue carved from ice. The message was simple: Persephone must be allowed to return. Hades listened without expression. When Hermes had finished speaking, the Lord of the Dead sat in silence for a long moment, his dark eyes on the girl who had brought the only light his kingdom had ever known. Then, slowly, he nodded. He would obey his brother's command. Persephone would be released. But there was a condition. The law of the underworld was absolute, Hades explained. Any who ate or drank in his realm became bound to it. If Persephone had consumed even the smallest morsel of food or drink since her arrival, she could not fully leave. She would be tied to the underworld, obligated to return. Hermes turned to Persephone, hope and dread mingling in his chest. Had she eaten anything? Had she, in all these long months, taken even a single bite? Persephone met his eyes, and for the first time in so long she spoke. She had been so hungry, so terribly, endlessly hungry. And one day, wandering the palace gardens to escape the weight of stone above her head, she had found a pomegranate tree, its fruit bright as blood against the silver leaves. She had picked one fruit, only one, and she had eaten 6 seeds, 6 tiny rubies of flesh, barely enough to taste. 6 seeds, such a small thing, such a simple human need. But it was enough. The law held. Persephone was bound. Hades, who had perhaps known all along, perhaps had even left the pomegranate where she would find it, looked almost sad as he explained what this meant. She could return to the upper world, yes. She could see her mother again, feel the sun, walk in living meadows, but she could not stay forever. For each seed she had eaten, she would owe the underworld 1 month of every year, 6 months above in the light, 6 months below in the dark. This was the compromise. This was the price. And so it was agreed. Hermes led Persephone up through the winding ways back toward the light. The journey was long, and with each step the air grew warmer, less still. Color began to creep back into the world around them. Gray stone became brown earth. Brown earth became green moss. And then, finally, after what felt like a lifetime of climbing, they emerged into the world of the living, into a meadow that Persephone recognized, though it was winter-dead and covered in frost. Demeter was there, waiting. She had known somehow. The moment Persephone's foot touched the living earth again, Demeter had felt it, and she had come, running as she had run the day her daughter was taken, but this time toward reunion rather than loss. They fell into each other's arms and both wept, and the earth itself seemed to sigh with relief. For 6 months the world knew joy again. Demeter, reunited with her daughter, returned to her sacred work. The fields greened, flowers bloomed, grain grew tall and golden. The mortals celebrated and gave thanks. Mother and daughter walked together through orchards heavy with fruit, and it seemed for a time that everything had been restored. But when the 6th month ended, Persephone felt the pull. The earth beneath her feet seemed to grow thin. Shadows lengthened. She knew, and Demeter knew, that the time had come. They said their goodbyes at the same meadow where Persephone had been taken, and this time Persephone descended willingly, walking down into the dark to keep her oath. She kissed her mother's cheek and promised to return when her time below was finished. And Demeter, left alone again, felt the familiar grief return, though softened now by the knowledge that loss was not forever, that spring would come again, that her daughter would return. But for 6 months she could not tend the world with a full heart. The crops faded. The trees lost their leaves. Cold came creeping over the land, and mortals learned to prepare, to store food, to endure the dark season, knowing it would pass. This is how winter came to be. Not as punishment, but as the echo of a mother's grief. Not as cruelty, but as the rhythm of a world learning to accommodate love and loss in equal measure. Every year Persephone descends. Every year Demeter mourns. And every year, without fail, the daughter returns and the mother remembers joy, and the world blooms again. The ancient Greeks who told this story understood something true about the nature of life. That light and dark are inseparable. That growth requires rest. That even gods must learn to live with grief, to carry it without letting it destroy them, to trust that what is lost will, in time, return in a new form. Demeter still walks the earth, though we no longer see her with mortal eyes. But we feel her presence in the first warm day after a long winter. We sense her joy when the first green shoots push up through thawing ground. And we understand her sorrow when the leaves begin to fall, when the days grow short, when the world turns inward and quiet. Persephone, too, remains, moving between realms, belonging fully to neither but carrying gifts from both. From the underworld she brings patience, depth, the understanding that darkness is not evil but simply another country, one that teaches different lessons than the light. From the upper world she brings memory of warmth and color, hope that sustains even in the deepest places. And Hades, in his shadowed kingdom, waits for her return each year. He is gentler now, they say, less lonely. He has learned that love cannot be stolen or held by force, that the only love worth having is love freely given. When Persephone comes to him now, it is as a queen who has chosen her crown, who understands her power, who has made peace with her dual nature. This is the gift of the myth. Not a simple tale of good and evil, but a complex truth about how we live with loss, how we endure separation, how we find meaning in the cycles that govern our days. The story does not end with rescue and happily ever after. It ends with acceptance, with compromise, with the understanding that some griefs cannot be fixed, only honored and woven into the fabric of our lives. The seasons turn as they have always turned. Winter comes and we prepare. Spring returns and we celebrate. And somewhere beneath it all, a mother and daughter count the days until reunion, carrying their love across the boundary between worlds, proving that even death itself, even the deepest darkness, cannot sever the bonds that matter most. Let this story settle over you now like snow falling on quiet fields. Let it remind you that rest is holy, that darkness has its place, that every ending carries within it the seed of new beginning. The world sleeps, and in sleeping, gathers strength. What is buried is not lost. What descends will rise. And love, true love, endures all seasons, all separations, all the turnings of the wheel. Sleep well, and know that spring always returns.